So you want me to start now?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And welcome to the 7th session. Alhamdulillah. And we have looked at so many things related to the concept of knowledge. Today we shall be talking about the history of human knowledge, which is one of the topics missing from the discussions I have listened to on the concept of knowledge, and also the books that I've read on this concept. Scholars have not really talked about the history of human knowledge as a topic, which to me is a very important topic to understand how knowledge started. Why? Because without knowing the history, we shall not know how far we have moved from that time to where we are today. And there are so many related issues actually to this very important topic. Last week, we talked about the senses and the intellect, and we saw the relationship between the two. And I did mention that the senses are the gateways to knowledge. Of course, the intellect plays the most important role, because whatever goes through our senses reaches the intellect and it gets digested, it is analyzed, and then we choose or we decide. So without the intellect, the outside world would remain dark, as I did mention. The senses would be meaningless. So what makes the senses meaningful is actually the intellect that Allah has granted us. And I'll be talking furthermore on that topic, inshallah, when I describe the history of human knowledge. I have prepared the slides for your reference, and I have based on ayah 30 to ayah 33 of Surah Al-Baqarah to talk about the history of human knowledge, as I couldn't find any other verse that actually describes the history of human knowledge. So allow me to share the slides that I have so that you will have a reference. These are the slides. Just a minute. These are the slides on the history of human knowledge. As you see, these 2 or 3 ayat, which are very common. Every one of us have read these verses, but we may not have taken time to reflect deeply on the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conveys to us. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وإذ قال ربك للملائكة إني جائل في الأرض خليفة قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها ثم عرضهم على الملائكة فقال أنبئوني بأسماء هؤلاء إن كنتم صادقين قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. When we look very closely at these verses, we actually conclude with more than 5 things. Before I show you what I have prepared based on my understanding of these verses, it is clearly mentioned in these verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathered the malaika. And we are not informed of the number of the malaika who were gathered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we may say that Jibril was one of them, who is the chief of the malaika. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presented Adam to them, and he tested them by asking them to mention the names of ha'ula'i. Those who speak Arabic, they know very well that ha'ula'i is ishara. It is to point at things that are present. So things were presented. But what are those things? Ha'ula'i is used to refer to living things, mainly human beings. And it is also used to refer to the malaika. So the description of the malaika is ha'ula'i, and the description of human beings is also ha'ula'i in Arabic. When you are referring to non-living things, you use hadhihi. So ambi'uni bi asma'i hadhihi, that is not what is used in this ayah. Allah uses ha'ula'i. Based on this, there are some scholars who say that ha'ula'i is actually referring to the malaika who were presented to the malaika, who were not seen before. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the malaika to mention the names of those malaika who were presented to them. So they were strangers. They were seen for the first time since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them. And they were not able to mention their names. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked Adam alayhi salam to name them. And Adam was able to mention the names of those malaika, ha'ula'i, according to one interpretation. So what does it teach us? It teaches us that the number of the malaika is too big to be known even by the malaika themselves. So there are malaika who have not been seen before, yet they are in existence. One of our brothers did ask me at the beginning of this class whether there are some aliens, living beings that are not on this planet. And I said, Wallahu alam, we don't have the knowledge concerning those living creatures, but we cannot say that they don't live or they don't exist, because even the malaika acknowledged that the knowledge given to them is limited, and they glorified Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the knowledge he has. So we have to admit the limitation of our knowledge in the first place. This is what the ayah teaches us. But we also understand, based on the interpretation of the scholars, that asma'i ha'ula'i refers to things that Adam was shown. So Allah showed him certain things which he was able to name. There are those who say that he was shown everything, and he was shown even the posterity, Zuriya, his posterity, and he was able to name each one of us. That view is also held by some scholars, because Ha'ula'i is also referring to human beings. So human beings and things put together are referred to as Ha'ula'i. So Adam was able to name each and everything that is considered useful, and he was also able to name all human beings according to one interpretation. Wallahu alam, this is not mentioned anywhere in any hadith. It is just a view held by some scholars, and there is no harm for us to look at it. But what is concerning us mostly today is the history of human knowledge based on the verses that you see. I have the translation for those who are not able to understand Arabic. The translation of this verse or these verses are here. You can always look at the translation of the meaning of these verses. But I have drawn from these verses the following. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate source of all knowledge. There is no knowledge that we can ever acquire successfully without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is no knowledge that we can ever acquire which is unknown to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he is al-alim, al-hakim. He is the all-knowing and the most wise. So whatever wisdom that we acquire based on our intellect, and whatever knowledge that we acquire on the basis of the senses and the other means, that knowledge is already known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala since eternity, from no beginning, because he is al-alim, he is al-hakim. So this is what we understand based on that ayah before I talk about the history of human knowledge, how human knowledge began. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate source of knowledge. He is the one who has taught human beings what he knows. And he is also the one who has guided us, and he continues to guide us in every situation. So knowledge does not come to an end. It continues to come to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the relationship we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in regard to guidance and knowledge continues. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught and guided other creatures as well, as it is indicated in these two verses from Surah Taha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ فَمَنْ رَبُّكُمَا يَا مُوسَى. When Musa alayhi salam appeared to Fir'aun together with his brother Harun, Fir'aun asked both of them, who is the Lord you described to me, the one you mentioned to me, other than me? They said, رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَ ثُمَّ هَدَى. That our Lord is the one who has created everything and gave it nature and form. ثُمَّ هَدَى, and he has guided everything. What does it mean? It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has made everything unique. So when you talk about knowledge, we are also talking about uniqueness. Everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created has its uniqueness. So part of the process of knowing is actually to know the differences between things. When you know the differences between things, then you have the knowledge concerning those things. When you are not able to differentiate between things, then you don't have the knowledge, or the knowledge you have is limited. Adam alayhi salam was given the ability to differentiate between things. Asma'u ha'ula'i, referring to the names of the things, it also means that he was given the ability to differentiate between each and every being. That is very important in knowledge process. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not only granted knowledge, but he has also granted guidance to every living creature. So knowledge is guidance. And when you talk about the history of knowledge, we are also talking about the history of guidance. We are talking about the history of wahyu, knowledge that has been granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as guidance. So it goes back to that time that is indicated in this ayah, the time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathered the malaika and he presented Adam to them, and he did ask them to name things that they were not able to name because that knowledge was not granted to them. That is the beginning of human knowledge that we talk about. The second or the next point that I have derived from those verses is that the history of human knowledge begins with Adam alayhi salam, and it cannot be described without basing it on the ayat that I have shown you. As I did mention in the beginning of this lecture, I could not find any verse in the Quran that describes the history of human knowledge other than the verses which I have shown to you. Ayah 30 to Ayah 33. Those are the verses which describe the history of human knowledge. And I have not said the history of knowledge. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-alim. He has knowledge, and his knowledge has no history. His knowledge has no beginning. But I have also not said that the history of the knowledge of the malaika, because we don't know when their knowledge began. The malaika were created before us, and there is no any ayah in the Quran to describe the history of the knowledge of the malaika. But we have ayah to describe the history of the knowledge of human beings. And those are the verses I have shown to you. Next point. Knowledge is the greatest treasure given to human beings. And it is the greatest blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. The blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon human beings cannot be counted, as we did mention before. There are too many to count. And Allah's treasure also is beyond our comprehension. Yet knowledge is considered to be the greatest of all treasures given to us. And it is considered to be the greatest blessing given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is also the highest dignity Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has endowed on human being. So there is no any other dignity. If you want dignity, you'll find dignity in knowledge. There is no dignity outside knowledge. Dignity is not based on one's position in the society. Dignity is not based on one's lineage, nasab, but dignity is based on knowledge. How much knowledge you have and how you are guided, because knowledge and guidance should be linked together. There is no point of having so much knowledge but you are not guided. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided human beings by granting them knowledge. But human beings sometimes have knowledge without guidance because they choose not to live a life that is guided, simply because they are comfortable with the life that is based on hawa nafsu. So they ignore the guidance that is given to them. They have the knowledge, but they don't want to apply the knowledge in their lives, not because they are not granted guidance or knowledge. And I did mention before that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has categorized human beings into two, because he has sent guidance to all of them, right from Adam alayhi salam until Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All those prophets brought knowledge and guidance to human being. So the classification of human being I did give you 2 weeks ago was those who are given a blessing, munam alayhim, they are blessed. They are blessed with knowledge and guidance. And those who are given knowledge, but they decide to lead a life that is not knowledge-based. And those are the ones Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described as maghdubi alayhim ad-dallin. Allah is angry with them and they are lost because they have the knowledge, yet they don't live based on the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted them. Adam alayhi salam was given knowledge in order to be guided, as I will mention later. And this is the greatest blessing that every one of us should appreciate. And this is the greatest kind of ni'mah which every one of us should preserve, not only to acquire, but to preserve and appreciate and be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. Now, knowledge is an illuminator. It illuminates our life. And I will talk about this point, inshallah, when we come to another topic, which is on the importance of knowledge. It is the requisite for the fulfillment of our physical and spiritual needs. You cannot fulfill your physical needs without knowledge. You cannot develop this world without knowledge. You cannot succeed spiritually without knowledge. So whatever ibadat that we perform are knowledge-based. And whatever kind of achievements we have in life are also knowledge-based. Meaning that we cannot talk about human achievements without knowledge. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted knowledge to human beings in order to achieve certain things during their stay here. So we are not here just to enjoy ourselves, but we are here in order to achieve certain things that are related to our physical well-being and also our spiritual well-being. So wa'allama Adam means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave knowledge to Adam that would help him succeed spiritually as well as physically. So the two bodies of knowledge are very important to us. Talking about the knowledge that is needed to develop this world and knowledge that is needed for us to succeed in the hereafter. Both knowledge were granted to Adam alayhi salam, and both knowledge need to be preserved and acquired by every one of us. Now, coming to the next point, human dignity resides in his rational nature and is earned by knowledge. Why I mention the intellect here, or the rational nature of human being? Because allama Adam al-asma'a kullaha, the intellect itself is addressed, because there is no knowledge in the case of human being without the intellect, as I did mention before. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted the senses to Adam alayhi salam, and he also granted him the intellect. What we know is that at that time, Adam alayhi salam had not yet used his senses in a way that could lead him to the knowledge that he was told to let the Malaika know. Later, after that, he was placed into Jannah, where he saw a lot of things. But that happened before he was placed into Jannah. So everything was very new to him. What we understand is that the knowledge given to Adam alayhi salam is the knowledge that came directly to his intellect, to his mind, not the knowledge acquired based on the senses. So the knowledge that comes directly to the mind, and I did mention that before, that knowledge can come directly to the mind without the need of the senses. But there is also knowledge that needs the senses to reach the mind. So the knowledge that comes directly to the mind is given to every human being in the form of ilham and in the form of other means. We shall talk about those different means to knowledge that comes to the heart, inshallah, if we still have time. So Adam alayhi salam was given knowledge that was direct knowledge, not knowledge that is indirect. Indirect means that you need the senses in order to have that knowledge. You need to see what Allah has created in order to know, without which you can never know. So Allah granted him the knowledge that was direct. And ignorance is the absence of knowledge, and it is the cause of the mischief and bloodshed. Well, when you refer back to the verses of the Quran, the response of the Malaika, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to them that inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa, was ataj'alu fiha man yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku dima. So there are two issues here. Fasad, which means corruption, and to shed blood. So you are going to place a being in the dunya who is going to shed blood and is going to cause, fasad, or is going to commit fasad. So we know that fasad is the opposite of Islah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed us here in order to do Islah, or imarul ard. I'll be talking about that later. I don't want to go into the details of those two concepts. But Adam alayhi salam replaced those who were here before, who had committed fasad. Why? Because they did not use the knowledge given to them in order to perform the actions that were required. So they did not benefit from the guidance Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them. And because of the ignorance, they committed fasad. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted knowledge to Adam alayhi salam so that he would be able to do what we call Islah. And he would be able to carry out his responsibility here. Without knowledge, he wouldn't be able to carry out his responsibility. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been very kind to human being to grant him knowledge, then he made him responsible. So to be made responsible without knowledge is considered injustice. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inni haramtu zulma ala nafsi wa ja'altuhu bainakum muharrama fala tazalamu. I have made injustice forbidden upon myself, or I have forbidden injustice upon myself and made it forbidden upon you. Do not ever commit injustice. So the beings that lived here had committed zulm. And zulm is committed when one does not benefit from the knowledge and guidance given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted the knowledge to Adam alayhi salam so that Adam would not have a hujjah, to have an excuse for the wrongdoing committed. So we are held responsible and punished simply because we have the knowledge. So this is again the reason why I mentioned here that ignorance was the cause of mischief. and it was the cause of the shade of blood that are mentioned in the ayat that are gone. There is a very beautiful hadith here reported by Abu Huraira, who said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when the time draw close to the last hour, that is before Qiyamah, knowledge would be taken away. And as a result, turmoil would be rampant. Miserliness would be put in the hearts of the people, and there would be much al-harj. Then the companions asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to tell them the meaning of al-haraj, and he said bloodshed. Referring back to the ayah, the Malaika said, Ataj'alu fiha man yufsidu fiha. So the fasad is mentioned in this particular hadith. Wayasfiku dima, it is also mentioned in this hadith. So the two reasons for the destruction of the beings that were there before Adam alayhi salam are mentioned in this hadith. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned clearly in this hadith that it is due to the ignorance, the absence of knowledge, or the disappearance of knowledge that al-haraj shall be committed, which is actually the bloodshed, which is also the fasad. So fasad can only be avoided with knowledge. Bloodshed can only be avoided with knowledge. What does it mean? We need the intellect to differentiate between the right and the wrong. We need the intellect in order to live as rational beings. Without the intellect, we are not different from the animals who shed blood, who commit all kinds of wrongdoing. We are not different from them. When I say shed blood, it's just a metaphor to say that doing things that are not acceptable to the rational being. Doesn't mean that the animals are shedding blood. No, they fight one another. They are governed by their nafsu. So we need knowledge in order to be in control of our nafsu. Without the knowledge, there is no way that you can ever manage your nafsu. I was talking to somebody today in the morning regarding the nature of the nafsu of human being. And I said that the nafsu will always find something to busy itself with. It can never be free. And once it gets something to busy itself with, it takes control over your intellect. It dominates you. So all what you have to do is to make it busy with something that it doesn't like. Because when you make it busy with what you have chosen, you'll be in control of your intellect. So we need to find something to make the mind busy with. Either you are reading, acquiring knowledge, so the mind will be busy with the knowledge. Once you are not doing anything, the mind will be busy with something else. And I also did mention another thing which is related to progress and regress, because again, that is one of the issues I want to highlight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed us in this world in order to progress, not to regress. And he says in the Quran, لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَن يَتَقَدَّمْ أَوْ يَتَأَخَّرْ. Whoever wants it to progress will progress, but whoever wants it to regress will regress. So there is no middle position. So you are either progressing or you are regressing. If you're not doing something that is bringing you to another level, then you are actually regressing, getting down to the lower levels. You are not static. In other words, a human being is not static. There is no such a position in Islam which is to be static. Because when you are static, then somebody else will, will move forward and you'll be left behind. So you are regressing. This ummah is there to lead. Al-Islam ya'alu wala yu'la alayh. Islam is there to lead, not to be led. So when you are led, you are actually regressing. This is not something to feel proud about. So our intellect is there to lead us to progress, not to lead us to regress. A person is led to regress once he does not busy his mind with something that is beneficial, meaning that the mind should not be left alone. Once you leave it alone, then you become the slave of the nafsu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam and he granted him knowledge, which also means that he granted him the intellect, which is the ability to think rationally, which is actually the light of the mind, without which you live in darkness. This world, as I did mention before, would remain dark if not because of our intellect. It is the intellect that brightens the world, that makes the world meaningful, that we are able to see the importance of the things that we have because we have the intellect. This is not the case with the creatures which are not given the intellect. So this is another point that we need to reflect upon. So the next point is the authority that is given to us. We are the ones who are in charge of the affairs of this world. This is a great honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted to human being. Now, that particular authority which we have is only possible because of knowledge. And that knowledge we talk about is very different from the knowledge given to other creatures. They are also guided. What is that knowledge? What is the nature of that knowledge actually? It is the intellect. The intellect that is able to decide, the intellect that is able to create the concepts so that we are able to translate the concepts into things that are useful to us. We are talking about the creativity and innovation, that we are able to create and innovate. Creativity is the act of the mind based on which we innovate. You cannot innovate anything without having the concept, without having the idea, meaning that the process begins from the mind. So from the mind, it is translated into the actions. Whatever kind of things that we enjoy are attributed to the power of the mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Whatever development that we have today, the physical development, material development, are all attributed to the power of the mind, the intellect. And this is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted Adam alayhi salam in order to lead. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted that intellect, which he granted Adam to other creatures, then other creatures would dominate. However, we are the ones who dominate. We are the ones who are in authority simply because we have the intellect. We are the khilafah ul-arud, made the successors and the developer of this world because of the intellect granted to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the next point is possession of knowledge is a requirement of khilafah, leadership or human custodianship of earth. This is already highlighted in the point that is gone, that we cannot carry out our duties as a khulafa ul-ard without knowledge. Why? Because being a khalifa requires a person to know his duties towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has entrusted him with this world. So you need to know the relationship that you have with your Lord. You need to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires you to do. You need to know the relationship that you have with your fellow human beings. You need to know the relationship that you have to nature, the relationship that you have to other living creatures as well. So that knowledge was granted to Adam alayhi salam. So Allah granted him the knowledge which was vast in nature, to know not just his duties towards his fellow human beings or zuriya and towards this world, but also his duties towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are the do's and what are the don'ts? Because being a Khalifa means that you are responsible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the owner, who has entrusted you with something that you don't own. So that knowledge was given to him. And for this reason, I have mentioned here that possession of that knowledge is a requirement for being a Khalifa. So without having the knowledge, we are not khulafa ul-ard. Now, the next issues that I want to highlight here may not be written here. Talking about the history of human knowledge, we are actually talking about the beginning of knowledge. Knowledge has a beginning in the case of human being. And we have so many verses in the Quran which say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted the mind to the human being, and he granted him also the senses when he was in his mother's womb. I read those verses to you before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'alamuna shay'a wa ja'ala lakum as-sam'a wal absara wal af'ida la'allakum tashkurun. These verses may also be relied upon to talk about the history of human knowledge. But what is mentioned in these verses is very different from what is mentioned in Ayah 30 to Ayah 33. Ayah 30 to 33 are referring to Adam alayhi salam, who is the father of all human beings. He was granted knowledge, but the knowledge that he had, he also passed it to his zuriyah. And that knowledge has been passed down to the next generations and the next generations. So knowledge has never died out from that time onwards. Adam alayhi salam preserved the knowledge that was given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by passing it to the next generation. And the next generation passed it to the next generation until where we are. So which means that whatever development that we have today is actually attributed to those who came before us. Without them, there is no continuation. So the continuity is only possible because there is something that has been there before. If not because of the concept that was given to Adam alayhi salam, we wouldn't be able to know the nature of the things and even to know the function of the things. So وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the concept of the things, but he also made him know the function of everything and the true nature of everything, the differences between things. So the concept of knowledge, as I did mention in the beginning, when you talk about the process of knowing, it involves knowing the differences. Why the differences? Because when you are not able to know the difference between things, you don't have the knowledge. What is the difference between Islamic knowledge and secular knowledge? That is very crucial. If you have not studied the secular knowledge, you will not be able to tell the differences between Islamic knowledge and secular knowledge. So you need to have both, to have studied Islamic knowledge and secular knowledge in order to tell the differences. Many of us may not have studied Islamic knowledge, but we have acquired the secular knowledge. So we are not able to tell the differences. And some of us have acquired Islamic knowledge, but we have not acquired the secular knowledge. Again, we cannot tell the differences. So you need to study both in order to tell the differences. That is number one, to differentiate between things. Then you'll be able to know which one is right, which one is wrong, which one is better, which one is not. So another thing is that you need to know also the true nature of things. When you don't know the true nature of things, again, you don't have knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted Adam the ability to know all. Knowing the function of things is very important. You may have a lot of things, but if you don't know their function, you will not benefit from them. This world possesses a lot of things that require us to know their function. Some of the trees that we have in our vicinity could be actually medicinal in nature. We don't benefit from them because we don't know their benefit. So when you know the true nature of something, only then you benefit from it. Adam alayhi salam landed here with prior knowledge. He was not placed here without having any knowledge that everything was very strange to him. He knew how the house should look like. He knew what kind of food to eat. Otherwise, certain things are poisonous. If he was just left alone without guidance, he wouldn't survive on his own. So he knew which particular roots can be eaten, which roots should not be eaten because they are poisonous. And he knew also his ways, where to go and where not to go. So all those things were taught to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we need that kind of guidance. And Allah continues to guide us in many, many, many ways. Sometimes you are not taught in school about certain things, yet you get to know them because the knowledge continues to come to you. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Adam alayhi salam in that verse, is also mentioning the zuriyah, the posterity of Adam alayhi salam. He wants us to acknowledge him as the teacher of all human beings, as the one who has taught knowledge. Without him, there would be no knowledge. Unfortunately, today, knowledge has been detached from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Human proud of the knowledge that they have. They attribute knowledge to the power of the intellect, but the intellect itself was granted knowledge by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we refer back to the ayah. The secularists do not acknowledge the existence of the creator. And when you don't acknowledge the existence of the creator, you will not explain knowledge in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So talking about the history of human knowledge is very crucial, because without knowing the history of human knowledge, relating it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then knowledge is detached from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a human being is detached from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, a human being will live without having the responsibilities towards his creator, because the one who has granted us knowledge has also made us responsible towards him. So we have a duty to appreciate him for that great ni'mah that he has given us, and that is knowledge. How do you appreciate knowledge? Knowledge is appreciated when you base your actions on it and you get guided by the knowledge that you have. I did mention to you before that one of the companions asked Aisha radiallahu anha about the Prophet's behavior, his conduct. And she did ask him, have you not read the Quran? He replied saying, yes, I have read the Quran. That was Quran based, meaning that all his actions were based on the guidance that he received from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to mention, Adabani Rabbi fa ahsana ta'dibi. My Lord has taught me the adab, the behavior, how I should relate myself to human beings and to other creatures in the best manner. So to acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a duty of every one of us, especially when it comes to the knowledge that we have. And it saves because the knowledge that we have is actually limited. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا does not mean that Adam was made to know everything. No, human knowledge is limited. Just like the knowledge given to the Malaika is limited. He was not known to know everything, because only Allah is Al-Alim, is the one who is all-knowing, the one who knows everything. Adam alayhi salam was given wisdom as well, knowledge and wisdom together, because the Malaika in their response, they said, Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim, which means that knowledge and wisdom should always be together. Without wisdom, knowledge may not be so beneficial to a human being. And I did talk about the concept of wisdom before. I gave the different interpretations of the concept, and I don't want to go into that. Well, Adam alayhi salam was given wisdom in order to rule, because we rule based on wisdom. Wisdom is what to do in the different situations. You cannot, again, simply make a decision as you wish. Let me decide on this matter right immediately. You need to deliberate. So deliberation on the issues, the ability to deliberate, the ability to contemplate was given to Adam alayhi salam. And this is one of the uniqueness of the human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that ability to reflect deeply, to contemplate, and to deliberate on issues before we make any decision. The decisions we make have to be based on knowledge that we acquire after deliberation. That knowledge may not be available right immediately, which actually also means that not every knowledge is available before you. Certain knowledge, you can only arrive at it based on deliberation, based on deep reflection. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, it also means that ability to arrive at the knowledge that is not available right immediately. So you need to deliberate. You need to render an effort to arrive at that knowledge. Without that effort, you will never be able to arrive at that knowledge. This is the uniqueness of human being, which is not given to other creatures. The angels do not need to deliberate on things. They have is right immediate. Whatever they do is done based on immediate knowledge given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Same thing goes to the animals. They don't have to deliberate and to reflect deeply. Whatever they do it based on the immediate knowledge given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But human beings have that ability to reflect deeply, to contemplate and deliberate. It may take you 1 year to arrive at certain conclusions, but you will definitely arrive at those conclusions on the basis of deep reflection and deliberation. So Adam alayhi salam was granted that, and the zuriyah of Adam alayhi salam was also granted that. Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'lamuna shay'a. The verse does not mean that when we came out of our mother's womb, actually we did not have any knowledge at all. Because there is also another verse that mentions that, again, this is very important to mention in regard to the history of human knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathered all human beings and he did ask them, Alastu bi rabbikum? Qalu bala, which indicates that human beings had certain knowledge before they were given bodies, when they were still spiritual in nature. Because according to reported by Abu Zarri, Allah subhanahu Ubay bin Ka'ab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the zuriyah of Adam from his back, and one of us was given form to look differently from others. And we were gathered based on the time of our existence, and we were asked, Alastu bi rabbikum? So we were able to understand. And that is why we were able to respond and say, Bala, yes, Allah, you are the creator. That was before we came here, conceived by our mothers. Into the bodies, meaning that when the ruh enters the body, the ruh already have the knowledge. The knowledge that goes back to a time that nobody can ever know. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked, Alastu bi rabbikum, we already had the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Rabb. So we responded on the basis of that knowledge and we said, Bala. So knowledge that is attributed to the spirit or to the ruh, its history goes back to that time and beyond even. We don't know exactly when Allah granted us that knowledge, but that is when we were basis of knowledge. But then later our bodies are created and the ruh enters the body with certain knowledge given to it, which the Prophet also refers to, and he says, Kullu mawludin yuladu ala al-fitra. Every human being is born with a consciousness. every human being is born with a consciousness, fitra, that there is a creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the consciousness that inclines us towards the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of other beings. So those who are not guided, they will end up worshiping other beings. And those who are guided, they will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on that fitra. So that knowledge also has its history. So when you talk about history of human knowledge, we are actually talking about three things. Number one, the knowledge that was granted to Adam alayhi salam as the father of human being, which was not given to us because at that time we were not yet gathered before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is also history of human knowledge. Then the history of human knowledge, which is attributed to the Ruh, which is mentioned in the ayah, Alastu bi rabbikum, and we said Bala. So that knowledge goes back again to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions when we come out of our mother's womb, and he says, Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'lamuna shay'a wa ja'ala lakum as-sam'a wal absara wal af'ida allakum tashkurun. So the knowledge Allah refers to, which we acquire after we are born and is acquired in different stages, that knowledge requires as-sam'u wal basar. It requires the senses. It requires the ears to listen, and it requires the eyes to see, wal af'ida, and it requires also the intellect. The intellect is not the raw, so we should not, confuse the two. So Allah granted these three to us. They are actually attributes of the body itself. So that knowledge, its history is right from the time we are born. So when we are born, we start to acquire knowledge. Utlubul ilma min al-mahadi ila lahad. Acquire knowledge from cradle to the grave. So that is the beginning of knowledge when you are born and you are exposed to things that you are not exposed to before. So everything is very new. Human knowledge begins from there. Human knowledge in regard to Adam alayhi salam began long time ago, based on the verse that I've read. But human knowledge, which is attributed to the raw, that again even began, again during the same time, I should say, because the hadith mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the zurriya from Adam. So after the creation of Adam alayhi salam, and after Adam alayhi salam was taught the names of the things, then Allah took the zurriya from his back, and he gathered the zurriya of Adam alayhi salam, and he did ask all of them, Alastu bi rabbikum. So that knowledge came later after the knowledge given to Adam alayhi salam. Then there is another knowledge which came later after that. That is the knowledge that we are given when we are born, and we continue to acquire that knowledge until we die. So given knowledge and acquired knowledge, these are two categorization of knowledge. Given knowledge, its history is what I have described based on ayah 30 to ayah 33, and also based on the ayah, Alastu bi rabbikum qalu bala, that is given knowledge. We did not render the effort to have that knowledge. We did not need ijtihad in order to have that knowledge. It is a divine gift to human being. But there is knowledge that requires effort, and you have to struggle to get it. That knowledge also has its history. That is the knowledge which is referred to in the verses, Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'lamuna shay'a wa ja'akum as-sam'a wal absara wal afida la'allakum tashkurun. So as I conclude, I should say that history of human knowledge is based on three verses. The third, of course, is more than one ayah. Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum. There is more than one ayah mentioning the same, but I'll call it a verse because it mentions the senses and the intellect. So that history, and then there is knowledge that is attributed to the raw in the case of all human beings. It has also its history. And also knowledge that was given to Adam alayhi salam also has its history. So altogether is what I call human knowledge. And I say history of human knowledge, referring to those three types of knowledge. With that, I will be ending today's discussion on the history of human knowledge. And you are free to ask in case there are issues that you want to raise. We have 3 minutes. Jazakumullah kulla khair. Shukran lakum. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
We need another 30 minutes, Prof.
Huh?
To answer. We need another half an hour, actually.
Half an hour.
No, no.
Alhamdulillah. So, let me listen from you, and then inshallah, whatever I need to add, I will add it. Alhamdulillah, we still have a lot of time.
I'm just kidding. We take a few questions and then we'll wrap up. The first one from Brother Sister Hafsat. Please, sir, what is the conscious mind of a human being from Quran? What is the conscious mind of a human being?
Or based on the Quran?
Based on the Quran.
Okay, a conscious mind actually is something that is related to, I mean, there are so many concepts used by the ulama to describe the conscious mind. Some of them would say, this is a fitra in us, that we have the consciousness within us regarding certain things, but not everything, of course. Human knowledge is limited. There is
Losing the voice. Okay. We wait for a while, maybe Prof will come back. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, Jazakallah kulla khair. Yeah, there was a disconnection. Anyway, consciousness that we are referring to here actually is something quite complicated. Why? Because according to some scholars, consciousness is something to do with the raw. It is not something to do with the body. Meaning that the consciousness and the raw are always together. It is the raw which is conscious. How is it conscious? Sometimes, let's say somebody may be looking at you from the back and you are not able to see him, but you will feel that there is somebody looking at you. So when you look back, you will see somebody is looking at you. That is consciousness. That consciousness is not with the body, is with the raw. So the raw has prior knowledge that precedes the knowledge of the body itself. Meaning that when we talk about the intellect, the human intellect, which is always attributed to the human body, the intellect acquires knowledge, but the soul have got the knowledge before the intellect itself. So the consciousness is there in us, but sometimes the consciousness needs to be awakened. What consciousness needs to be awakened? Let me give you one example of the consciousness that needs to be awakened. The prophets came to awaken the consciousness within us that there is a creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is in fitra. Every one of us have it in him. But we are not able to even recall that we were gathered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asked Allah to be Rabbikum. when the prophets come and tell us, the consciousness is awakened. Another thing is that when we dream, certain places look very familiar to us as if we have been there before. So we have the consciousness with us outside the body. So that is something, again, to do with the ruh, that the ruh has the consciousness with it. There is no possibility for the ruh to live without the consciousness. But the body also has its own consciousness, that the body also does not live without that consciousness. Certain actions that we perform are based on the consciousness that is attributed to the body, to the mind, or the consciousness that is attributed to the ruh. So which particular consciousness, for example, we are referring to, we have to identify. Is it the consciousness that is with the ruh, or is it the consciousness that is within ourselves, within the nafs of the human being? And the details regarding consciousness are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because there is no any possibility for any human being to tell you the details regarding the consciousness of human being, because it is something that is intangible. You can't touch it, and you cannot point at which exact place in the human body the consciousness is. There are stories of the individuals who happen to be in coma, third stage. According to the medical doctors, there is no any response from their brain. And later, when they wake up, they are able to tell that certain things happened. And some of the things they tell actually were witnessed by the people who are there. So they have that kind of consciousness with them, even though the bodies are not responding. And the same thing goes to our dreams. The consciousness continues to be with us outside the body. And when we enter our bodies, we still have that consciousness with us. So consciousness is a very complicated topic that nobody will be able to explain in detail what consciousness actually is exactly. That is left to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is one indicator that there is actually life outside the body, and that there is a creator who has given us that consciousness. Wallahu alam. Thank you very much.
We take last one from Brother Ali. How can one reconcile between Allah taking away of knowledge as a sign of the last hour and abundance of knowledge with less practical or less practice in present time? Why certain knowledge is secret and certain open to us?
That is a very good question, actually. What we know is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah la yugayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yugayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah does not take away a ni'mah from the people until people fail to appreciate the ni'mah. That understanding is based on that ayah. So knowledge is given to us in order to appreciate, in order to be guided. So if we remain guided, knowledge will always be with us. But knowledge is taken away when we fail to benefit from the knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to destroy a qawm, a nation that appreciates knowledge and lives according to the divine guidance. That is clearly mentioned in the ayat of the Quran, because they appreciate the knowledge. But Allah destroys a nation which does not appreciate the knowledge and guidance. So knowledge will be taken away when it will not be appreciated by people anymore. That is when the haraj is going to happen, because the consciousness itself will not be there. Human beings will not feel regretful of the wrong that they will commit during the time of haraj, bloodshed. It is in the nature of human being to feel regretful when he commits a wrongdoing. And that is why the story of Kabil and Habil is mentioned in the Quran. They were not taught by Adam alayhi salam that death means this. They had never seen death before, the death of any human being was never seen before. Even the death of any other living creature was never seen before by the children of Adam alayhi salam. But we are told that one of them killed the other. So he performed an action that led to death, and only then he knew, he became conscious that what he did was wrong, because he saw his brother's body motionless, and he knew that was death. So how did he know that it was death? Was he told that that was death? No, it was in the consciousness that is with us. And that is why I said that consciousness has its limits as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that knowledge that, this is death and this is life. But he didn't know how to deal with the dead body until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught him what to do with the dead body. Again, I don't want to go into the story. The point here is Allah will take away the knowledge when knowledge will no longer be beneficial to human beings. So the ni'mah will be taken away. So before the ni'mah is completely taken away, we have to benefit from that ni'mah. But there is also one hadith which mentions that the Quran will be lifted. The Quran will be taken away from writings or from the books, as well as from the memories of those who have memorized it. What does it tell us? It tells us that at that time, people who would have memorized the Quran will not be actually living according to the Quran. And the Quran would be read, but without being seen in the practices of the people or in the actions of the people. So when the Quran will not be seen in the actions of the people, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take the ni'mah that is given to us. Wallahu alam.
We take a quick one from Sister Shukriya. Prof, as mentioned, knowledge is prerequisite to become a Khalifa or ruler of Islamic State. Kindly clarify, is this knowledge refers to any degrees or specialty, or it is strictly to the knowledge of Quran and Sunnah? Presently, if we just talk about our ruler, they are international university qualified, but have no knowledge of Quran and Sunnah, which is the root cause of corruption among majority of Muslim politicians. So how to correct this system without having any effort for correcting the basic core foundation? We Muslim countries need a common platform for this kind of legislation.
Well, as we know, knowledge is guidance. Based on the ayat of the Quran, knowledge is guidance. And whatever knowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted us is actually guidance. But is there a knowledge that may help us to administer the affairs of this world, which is not revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Well, as we know, the Quran mentions two types of knowledge. That is based on ayah 102. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. Towards the end of it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يَضُرُّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُمْ. That is harmful and knowledge that is beneficial. So when we administer the affairs of this world, we are required actually to administer it based on beneficial knowledge. And that is the knowledge revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we don't know how to administer the affairs of this world unless we receive knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unfortunately, that knowledge has been placed aside by certain individuals, and they decided to administer the affairs of this world on the basis of nafsu, So when you administer the affairs of this world on the basis of nafsu, we don't call that knowledge. No, that is not knowledge. That is misguidance. Misguidance is not called knowledge. It's not an ilm. Ilm has to be nafi. It has to be beneficial. Knowledge has to benefit human beings. But when corruption happens, it means that we are actually administering the world based on the nafsu, our nafsu, what is pleasing to the nafsu. And when we start doing that, the corruption is everywhere. So yes, very true that the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us to manage the affairs of this world is knowledge that is considered to be beneficial and that is considered to be guidance that has been brought by all prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, the nafsu itself has taken over, which means that it has blindfolded us, that we are not able to realize even the wrong actions that we perform. The consciousness itself is taken away. Consciousness is taken away. That means that the person has actually lost the guidance, because the guidance is consciousness. If you're not conscious, you are not guided. You will never know that you are on the wrong path, because you're not conscious. You think that you're on the right path. So yes, very true, that knowledge that we need to manage the affairs of this world must come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not from any other source. Whatever knowledge that comes from other sources to manage the affairs of this world is not considered the knowledge that is required. Wallahu alam.
Thank you so much, Prof. We have learned so much in the past 7 weeks, the past lectures. I think your last line, that knowledge is appreciated when your action is based on it. I think this summarized the whole thing. If we learn those 7 lectures I'm good today, that we do not do anything about it, then Allah knows best. Final word, Prof, for today, and we'll meet you again next week on the 8th of August. We'll take a break for 2 weeks. Final words for today.
Inshallah.
Anything last you want to say for today?
Well, I should also mention this to the participants. Whatever we cover is actually a kind of, introduction to many other things that we are yet to say. There is so much to come after this, bi'iznillahi ta'ala. We cannot go into the details of each and everything, but we highlight certain issues that will be highlighted further. And some of the questions that you are raising are actually related to the topics that I'm going to cover later. So inshallah, if you are not getting the response that you expected, don't lose hope, inshallah. When I come to the topics related to what you have asked, inshallah, you will know more, bi'iznillahi ta'ala. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to guide us with knowledge that is beneficial. Jazakumullahu kulla khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
See you next 2 weeks, Prof, and see everyone in other classes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Wa alaikum salam.